أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على أشرف المرسلين سيدنا محمد صلى الله عليه وسلم. We are now at the conclusion of the path of Shaytaan, the thing that we've been talking about for the last few sessions. And just to summarize, the path of Shaytaan, we mentioned, has what? 4 conditions, 4 stages. And today we're going to be talking about the 4 objectives. And really you can take the path of Shaytaan and flip it on its head, and that will give you the actual path to Allah. If you get the path of Shaytaan and you do the complete opposite, you actually have the path of Allah laid out for you. So we mentioned, and we'll quickly go over it again just so that it's in everyone's heads. So the conditions we mentioned, number 1, being not having knowledge of your religion, ignorance of your religion. And there's many, and there's examples that we gave. A common example is that many people pray their salah, and they may pray for 2-3 hours, but the salah itself may not even be valid. They may be doing things like fidgeting, excessive movement in salah. To do this in your salah, to scratch your nose, touch your ears, 3 continuous movements invalidates the prayer. But people don't know. People there, doing a full out, sorting everything out. I remember someone told me once, a sister redid her hijab in salah. Right? So these things will invalidate the prayer. And even though she's standing there crying, it doesn't matter. There's no prayer. There's no prayer. So ignorance of your religion is the way Shaytaan, he gets your deeds and he makes them redundant. And they mention certain people come on Yawm al-Qiyamah expecting mountains of good deeds, and they see nothing. They see emptiness because of this reason. And then secondly, we mention false beliefs, and we talk about persistent in sin without tawbah and having energy and steadfastness on the sin. And then we talked about the 4 stages. How does sin come into your life? We mentioned first the nafs, the heart, it gets triggered. Yeah, Allah whispers something in the heart, not Allah, the Shaytaan whispers something in the heart or the nafs. And then thereafter that quality, for example, greed, it goes into the heart, and the heart then desires it. Then it goes into the mind, and the mind plots and plans, and then eventually it leads to the organs. And we mentioned that the best way to counteract this is start off with the organs. Stop sinning with the organs, start off with the end. Don't start, some people say, no, we need to start off with the nafs, I need to purify my nafs. But no, you start off actually with the body, and that would eventually take you, and we mentioned this is also the teachings of the Quran, where the verse mentions that if you correct your tongues, Allah will correct your actions. So today, what are the 4 objectives of this whole path that Shaytaan is trying to get you on? And they are 4. The first one is that Shaytaan wants you to give him preference over Allah. That he wants you to give preference to Shaytaan and your nafs over him. And we can find this in many examples. For what the common one is going to be on Eid, Fajr. Right? The whole mashallah Ramadan, we're doing Fajr, waking up for Sehri. And then Eid day comes, you wake, your eyes open, the Fajr alarm's going on. You probably left it on from Sehri time. And you're thinking, do I get up? Now it comes, are you going to give preference to Allah? Or are you going to give preference to your nafs, what you desire? And so the battle starts on day 1. It's not going to be like after a week, then Shaytaan, okay, now let me deal with this guy. No, it's literally day 1, it's going to start the battle. And so what you're going to do? So Shaytaan, he wants you to prefer him and your nafs. And the reality is that you can, and we see this people who have no religion, their preference is their nafs. All they know is their nafs. I. You've got the iPhone, everything's I. Nafs, selfie. It's just about me, myself and I. That's the world people live in. And Allah has not created us, and it mentions in the Quran why Allah created us. وَمَا خَلَقْتُ الْجِنَّ وَالْإِنسَ إِلَّا لِيَعْبُدُونَ. I did not create man or jinn except for, Allah say, for me. I've created you for me. And the uniqueness is our soul. Where's our souls from? That when Allah blew the soul of Adam from Allah into Adam alayhi salam. The soul is something that comes from Allah. We don't say it's a part of Allah, but it's from Allah. It mentioned in the Quran that we blew the soul into Adam alayhi salam. So the soul has a unique connection to Allah. And so when your soul, when yourself try to connect with anything else, when you try to connect with your nafs, or connect to Shaytaan, or to connect with any fashion, you will not find peace. You will find something is missing. You will find the aim or the purpose that you've given something else, you're not going to find peace in it. And it mentions that our Prophet ﷺ, that was his way, that was his life, that he knew Allah was his connection. And so his whole life was giving preference to Allah. To the point that the Prophet ﷺ gets the most honorable title. And it's mentioned that he got this title during Isra Mi'raj. And our teachers, they mentioned that and it's interesting, the conversation that the Prophet has with Allah, does anyone know it? Have we got it in writing anywhere? We don't, right? But our teachers, they say, from insight, they mention what? That in the Quran, a part of this conversation comes. How so? Because if you look at the Prophet ﷺ, he spends his whole life propagating the message of Allah. He spends his whole life being a true servant of Allah. So what the Prophet really wanted, right, is that Allah recognize his ubudiyah. And so when Allah mentions in Surah Isra, what? He goes, Subhanalladhi asra bi abdihi. What? He goes, praise or glory be to the one who took his slave. So now Allah is saying to the Prophet, you are my slave. So the Prophet is getting this title from Allah. How is many times when we love someone, we want the love to be returned, don't we? Right? That when you get married, there's an aspect of that love returning. You say to your spouse, I love you, you hope to get the same reply. Right? But and this is the same with Allah and your relation. But we don't know how it is with Allah and us until Judgment Day. But with the Prophet ﷺ, Allah has mentioned it clearly. Again, he goes, فَأَوْحَى إِلَىٰ عَبْدِهِ, that I revealed to my servant. Allah has given him such a grand title. And this is what the Prophet wanted. He wanted that connection with Allah. Even when the Prophet is about to pass away, they go, what are the last few words of the Prophet? Or what are the last few words? He goes, and some scholars say it's Rafiq al-A'la, the Prophet shouting Rafiq al-A'la. And the scholars, they talk about, why is the Prophet saying the most, Rafiq means like really close friend. Rafiq is like a really close friend. And A'la means like a really, he's literally saying the highest companion, the highest companion. And the scholars say the Prophet is calling out to Allah, meaning he's chosen Allah, that he just wants Allah now, that he's on his deathbed, and all he's worried about is his meeting with Allah, that he wants to see and be with Allah. And so this is the Prophet ﷺ teaching us that we should give preference to Allah in our lives, but then Shaytaan, he doesn't want that. That's the first objective of Shaytaan. And the second objective is that you give preference to bad role models. That you give preference to what? Role models other than the Prophet ﷺ. And this is a sad nature of our current times, that we've given everyone else except the Prophet ﷺ, we made them our role models, their way of life. You look at how we dress, how people walk, how people talk. You can just see from the actual way people behave. And then when you meet the scholars, they all have a similar way of talking, similar way of being. Why is that? Because they're trying to follow the Prophet ﷺ. And then you meet the other side, and they're all trying to be like hustlers or gangsters, and they're that small and they're that thin, and it's like, you know. And so our Prophet ﷺ had a concern for us. So we should have a concern for his sunnah. And it mentioned once again in the Quran where the Prophet's crying. He's crying, and it mentioned in the Quran, فَلَعَلَّكَ بَاخِعٌ نَفْسَكَ. Allah is saying to the Prophet, perhaps, O Prophet, you grieve yourself to death for their denial. Meaning that Allah is saying to the Prophet, you're upsetting yourself so much that these people are not believing in Allah, that they're not believing in me. Imagine, the Prophet is crying and upset at the disbelief of the people around him. What about us? What about us that we are not following his sunnah? Do you not think that upsets him? And many of us, you know, when you hear about the story of Ta'if, what happened in Ta'if when the people stoned the Prophet out? We say, oh, look at these people stoning the Prophet, how dare they? And then, you know, we get angry at them. But they say that there's a hadith that mentions that whenever you do a good deed that is presented to the Prophet ﷺ, likewise the sin. Now imagine you do a sin and the Prophet, he knows that you've done that sin. Do you not think that's going to be like a stone at him? That you've upset him, that he's lived his life trying to teach the deen, and you're sinning, you're literally just throwing a stone at the Prophet ﷺ, metaphorically. So don't think, oh, these people at Taif are bad, when yourself are stoning the Prophet ﷺ in that respect by sinning, and then your sins being presented to the Prophet. And what does he do on Yawm al-Qiyamah? They go, he stands at the scales. He stands at the scales, and when you come, they go, he intercedes. He goes, no, he's my believer. And he gives you his own deeds so that you enter Jannah. And that, not only that, then at the bridge, he refuses to enter Jannah, and he stands there making dua that we will cross. Imagine us, we get to the gates of Jannah later. Forget mom, dad, brother, sister. We see, the gardens, we'll be off. But the Prophet says, no, he's not entering. Even though he's got the door will only open for him. Jannah will only open for the Prophet ﷺ, but he's refusing to enter because he wants his ummah to go through with him. This is the person that we're neglecting. So is it not enough that we, from these little nuggets of knowledge about the Prophet ﷺ, that we give preference to him and not preference to the bad role models? And then the last two, so the third one is to cause distress to creation. That the rights of people, that the Shaytaan wants us to violate it. And we may think, oh, the rights of people are something small, but they're not. They even mention in a hadith, Sahih hadith, that the martyr will be forgiven, the shaheed will be forgiven for everything except debt. That on Yawm al-Qiyamah, you may have a £5 debt with someone, and he's gone and put his life for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. No, he's going to have to somehow pay that debt off on Yawm al-Qiyamah. His entry to Jannah will be paused until this debt is either excused or paid. Imagine. Could be like £5. And he's thinking, yeah, I'm going. And no, so the rights of people, even when you're doing tawaf around the Kaaba, it's impermissible to push someone to get to the black stone. It's impermissible, it's sinful to push a human to kiss the black stone. Why? Our teachers mention the human is more precious than the black stone. And so the preference is that if someone's in front of the black stone, it's not about pushing them, I need to kiss it. No. And then pushing someone's face in there and the next family member. That isn't the way. The sunnah is that if someone's there, you leave it, you walk, you just sign and you walk. Why? Because the people are more precious than the stone. Right? So the third is causing distress to creation. That's what Shaytaan wants. So the main thing to do is the opposite. To have compassion upon creation. That your family, your siblings, those that are close, those are the ones you're going to have problems with the most. Forget that people around here, people outside, they're mashallah, they're always going to get your best behavior. It's really the people that are close to you. And if you want to know where you're with Allah, ask your wife. Simple. If you want to know how close to Allah, maybe you're seeing visions and you're talking to whoever, and mashallah, you're seeing angels. But the person asks your wife, how is he at home? And then she goes, he's like this. Then it doesn't matter what you're seeing, really. It's about the interaction with people. But this is where the Prophet's unique. Because there's a hadith called the Hadith Zahra, a very beautiful hadith. There a group of women get together, and Aisha is amongst them, and they all talk about their husbands, right? And it's really interesting what they say, right? It's quite funny, but we won't go. It's quite a long hadith. But when they get to Aisha, so they get to one lady, Zahra, and she goes, what? She goes, my husband, mashallah, is this, he's great, but he left me. So she's remembering him, but she goes, oh, he left me for someone else. But he was so nice to her, she remembers. And when he goes to Aisha, she goes, what, radiallahu anha? She goes, my husband's better than the husband Zahra. The one I'm married to is better than anything that's been mentioned here. Imagine. So she's alone, she could have said anything. She goes, now's my time, I'll tell you how he is. No. She goes, he's like the best man ever. And so for a wife, and for those who are married, for your wife to say he's the best man ever, that itself is evidence to how great the Prophet ﷺ was. He had how many wives? They didn't complain about him. Imagine. Yeah, imagine not one wife complained about his character, his behavior. Like we have one wife and we can't stop hearing the complaints, right? Generally, right? So, well, I'm not pointing there, by the way. Yeah, inshallah, mashallah, Allah increase you guys. And then the fourth and the last objective of Shaytaan is what? He makes you forget Allah. He makes you forget the presence of Allah. Whereas the opposite should be what? Having taqwa. But the Shaytaan, he wants you to forget Allah, and it mentions in the Quran, what? Nasullaha fanasiyahum, that they forget Allah, so Allah forgets them. Right? That if you neglect Allah and you refrain from His obligations, then don't expect anything back. That Allah will forget you too. And so really the aim as Muslims is that we bring taqwa into our lives. Taqwa is like a shield between you and shaitan. That presence of Allah is the shield. When you remove that, you have no shield. And Ramadan is what? What's the point of Ramadan? Why are we fasting? It mentions in the Quran, لَعَلَّكُمْ تَتَّقُونَ. Perhaps they may attain taqwa. That is the aim, objective of Ramadan. So inshallah we hope that we can attain taqwa. And just to quickly summarize the 4 objectives of shaitan that you want to refrain from when you leave Ramadan. Number 1 is what? Giving preference to shaitan and nafs. Number 2, giving preference to false role models over the preference of the Prophet ﷺ. The third one, what's the third one? Yeah? Having or not having compassion upon creation, causing distress to people. And then the last one, as we just mentioned, is not having the presence of Allah, forgetting Allah in your life. And inshallah we'll end there and we'll go straight